When I went to embark on this speed build, I had totally intended on it just being a one-parter. In fact, I was hoping that I would be able to fit it as one episode. But as I am sure that you have guessed either through my announcements or through the thumbnail on here, that was definitely not the case. Now, for those of you just discovering my little corner of the internet, my name is Michael, and I want to welcome you to Sovereign Gaming in Life Sims, the YouTube channel where I build worlds, plots, and share my thoughts on video games in the life simulation gaming space. Now, what you're seeing being built right before your eyes doesn't even stay. I had spent hours trying to build this mansion, and it just really wasn't cutting it for me. I really didn't like the inspirations that I was taking, or at least I knew that I needed some new ones here. So what you're seeing right before your very eyes is something that is going to end up getting deleted, where I do restart it over completely. And that's not why it's taking up 3 parts of my episode here. I decided to actually leave this part in just to kind of show you guys a little bit of my process. And when I have like good references on hand, not to say that I'm not creative in my own right, but good references make a huge difference. And the references that I was using for this was just really not cutting it. Now, if you have been watching my series building out SimCity, you'll know that we are indeed not in the downtown core, building out some of the downtown core neighborhoods here. We are in fact in Pleasant View, and this is the hillside neighborhood that has a bunch of mansions on it. I did a build on it before with the Crumple Bottom Chateau, and now today we are building another mansion here, and this one is indeed Goth Manor. So part of the vision of the Pleasant View neighborhood was really just to give a home to the founding families of SimCity, and I consider the Crumple Bottoms, the Goths, the Land Grabs, and the Altos to be founding members of SimCity, or at least like the rich of the rich, that 1% there. And so I really wanted to just kind of change the pace a little bit before we get into building more of the urban neighborhoods, because after we do the Goth Manor build in the next couple of episodes, we're going to be spending a lot of time in the downtown core. So I felt that this was a nice way to kind of break up the pace. And with the way that this mansion build turned out, I really loved how it all turns out when I actually begin to restart and figure that one out. So yeah, I really loved how it all turned out, and I felt that it was a great episode to have as a return back to the back to posting videos regularly. So yeah, I felt that this not only broke up the pace a little bit for those of you that are binge watching my SimCity build out series, but it also was a really great episode, or a great speed build, I should say, that I felt was a great way to just kind of prove to you guys that I'm worth watching, or at least prove to myself that I'm worth creating these kind of videos. So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about the vision of Goth Manor here. Firstly, if you are new to my channel or are just kind of getting used to my build style, I do indeed, especially for larger builds, need to sort of map out what I'm doing before I actually place some walls in there. So I like to divide my walls into quadrants so that I know where the middle point is, where I know where the quarter points are, and all of that, just so that everything is aligned the way that I really wanted it to be aligned. For this mansion build, I really had a bunch of references that I was using, and I will be posting them up on screen here just so that you guys kind of get an idea of where my head was at. So I had some real life references that I was using, and they're great and everything, and I really use them for different aspects of them. For example, like I might use one for color, or I might use one for form. But the one thing that I really struggled with Goth Manor was the actual form of the mansion itself. You see, in Pleasant View, all of the lots that I've placed here, which is about, if I remember correctly, 7 or 8 lots that I have tucked away in the hillsides of Pleasant View, they're all 64 by 64 lots. And I could have gone the traditional way in terms of like reinterpreting the Goth Manor as a Victorian style mansion. And if I'm smart, I'll be placing a screenshot of it right now so that you guys kind of know what I'm talking about. But yeah, with that kind of mansion, I felt that it was just like not large enough for the footprint that I was offering players. And I would have had to have done a lot of outdoor space. And you know, that might have worked in retrospect if I really wanted to stay true to the Goths. But I really wanted to offer players an interpretation of Goth Manor that gives a lot of indoor living space to the actual lot. I'm a player that spends most of my time indoors with my Sims and all that, and I feel like the indoor space is where a lot of the creativity comes about. And I'm also not that strong with landscaping and creating outdoor spaces. I feel like I hold my own, don't get me wrong, but I don't feel like it's my forte, and I really wanted to play to my strengths with this kind of a mansion build. This Goth Manor turned out being the best thing I have ever built in The Sims, so I was super impressed with everything that I had decided to do. But yeah, I really wanted the scale and the massing of the mansion to really fit the lot more. I was giving myself a lot of space when creating this neighborhood in the Create a World series, which of course you guys can watch if you feel like it. And so I really wanted to make use of the space as best as I can. Now, with the Pleasant View lots, some are on like a sloped hillside, some are flat. This one was a flat one, and I'm really thankful for that as well, because building on flat lots is much easier than something that's on a slope. And I did purposely put some on slopes because I will be challenging myself in the future, but I'm not going to be doing a mansion build for a little while here. But yeah, the Goth Manor reference that ended up being the best reference that I used for this was actually something from the Moonlight Falls neighborhood, which was the neighborhood that came with the Supernatural expansion pack. And the mansion that I used as a particular reference from there is called the Massively Massive Mansion. So I use that as a reference, and I'll put that screenshot up here as well, just to show you guys like what that vision was giving me. But what I really, really loved about it was the fact that it was symmetrical, and that was very important for me going forward with this mansion build, because I view traditional mansions as being very symmetrical, whereas McMansions like the Crumple Bottom Chateau are something that is a little more asymmetrical, or it doesn't follow a symmetrical pattern. They're asymmetrical. Don't know why I decided to repeat myself. But anyways, the Massively Massive Mansion was something that I really loved for its symmetry and also the scale of it as well. I enjoyed the colors on it, and it was inhabited by a family that was full of vampires, and that I feel is very like a theme that I wanted to kind of flirt with just a little bit, like in the basement of this build of my own of Goth Manor. Now, we don't actually get to furnishing many parts of the mansion in today's episode. We're actually really only going to be focusing on the massing and the colors on the exteriors, and we do like a tiny bit of interior decorating in this episode. Like I said, this mansion build took me so long, and there is so much that I actually do want to talk about in terms of Goth Manor and the vision that I had. But the Massively Massive Mansion, which is funny to say out loud, that served as like the key reference that I really wanted to embody in this build, and I feel like it was absolutely the right choice that I made in terms of letting it be the leading reference, because I do a whole lot with this mansion and with Goth Manor and the space that it offers. And yeah, I was really happy that it existed first and foremost, because after I had deleted the first attempt at doing the Goth Manor mansion, I knew that I needed to find new references, because the ones that I had just really weren't serving me, and it wasn't really giving me a vision that I felt was worthy of Goth Manor, worthy of the plot of land, and of course like worthy of the neighborhood. By the end of this episode, like I do show off a screenshot like in the tour that kind of shows how Goth Manor overlooks Blue Water Village and the rest of SimCity, and eventually Pleasant View and like the plots of land there will all be filled with mansions that just kind of overlook the rest of the city, literally giving Pleasant View the name that it deserves. So yeah, very there's a lot that really went into it in terms of thought, and the way that it actually sits and interacts with the rest of the city is something that I had put a lot of time and thought in terms of building out all of the lots, to be quite honest with you. And you'll see that in future episodes, as well as at the time I'm recording the audio for this episode, I've done a bunch of other builds when we get back to the downtown core. And you know, the views from Pleasant View is one of the vantage points that I refer to the most when actually building out the rest of the skyline, since it does literally have the best views in all of the city. Arguably the best views, I should say, since since there are other great vantage points that you can have. Back to Goth Manor, something that I knew was going to be a challenge for me was designing some sort of a courtyard. If you remember back in the Crumple Bottom Chateau build that I did, the other build in Pleasant View, I gave quite a bit of space in the courtyard for cars to just kind of drive into and all that. Here at Goth Manor, I really narrowed the courtyard quite a bit, and in retrospect, I could have made it a lot larger, but that just really wasn't in the cards for me going forward. And there's no way I'll be able to edit that, since I'd have to absolutely replace everything in the mansion, and that was just going to be a huge pain in the ass. So that's not happening in an upcoming edit video where I make the courtyard larger. But anyways, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. One of the struggles with the courtyard was trying to convey a realistic space that vehicles could pull into and also like park and all that. I ended up deciding to go with two garages, actually, like on the west wing and the east wing of the mansion, because I wasn't too sure, firstly, of what I wanted to do with each of those spaces there, and I quite plainly needed to have a set of garages for the vehicles to actually pull in. And when it comes to mansion builds, I want to offer a lot of spaces for vehicles, since vehicles in The Sims 3 is very important, since it is quite literally the main way for Sims to actually get around. So I wanted to offer a lot of space for those vehicles. So I believe that like adding in like 3 parking spaces in each helps to convey that it is going to be a much larger garage. So you have 6 spaces in total for you to fit your vehicles in. This mansion is obviously going to be great for legacy players who like to do legacy plays, and I would suggest, like, you know, if you do a legacy play of the Goths, I suppose that this would very much fit the theme. Another thing that I also want to point out as well is that throughout this build and throughout this episode and the next episode, you're going to be seeing me place like some objects here and there. This is something that I do for builds that are taking a lot longer than I had anticipated. This is definitely one of those builds, hence why it's actually 3 episodes long, which I think is ridiculous, since that's pretty much the length of a Lord of the Rings movie. But anyways, I place some objects just as placeholder objects so that I can remind myself later on to actually decorate it as a certain room. So you'll see some doors placed that are not recolored, some archways placed so that I know the pathways for it. And you'll also see like maybe some toilets here and there that might feel a little bit random. It's all there to remind myself to actually like what the purpose of that room actually is. Since I, like, throughout this build, I was quitting and saving a lot and just really taking my time enjoying the whole process of building out Goth Manor here. And boy, was it an enjoyable process. So yeah, let's talk a little more about something that is very unique to this mansion, and that is the idea of hidden passageways. So, you know, in castles, like, yeah, in old castles and in older homes and mansions, even like older like much older residences and all that, there's always like hidden pathways or hidden passages and all that. Well, I really wanted to include that in the Goth Manor build here. And so you'll see me decorate some of these rooms with these really narrow hallways in the back. Well, those narrow hallways are going to be hidden passageways accessible by like those library bookcase doors, or even by some of the World Adventures doors that feel a lot more discreet, in my opinion at least. So there are hidden passageways built throughout Goth Manor, and they're built on all 3 floors, and in my opinion they do make a logical sense to it, just because you would need access to all 3 doors. But who accesses these doors? Well, I decided to answer that question a little bit more deeper, and you'll see it in the next episode if I remember correctly. But the way that I had designed these hidden passages was so that they could service areas that you would bring a lot of food in, or service areas that you'd have a lot of guests kind of intermingle at, so that you can have like discreet service while your guests are throughout the house. That was the vision for it anyways. It obviously doesn't really play out like this, and I've done some play testing with Goth Manor, and your Sims will walk through the hidden passageways if they find that it is a quicker route to wherever they're going, which is kind of funny. But anyways, I designed these hidden passages with the idea in mind that the Goths would obviously have Bonehilda residing in their home. And so what I've done is I've built those hidden passages with that in mind. And since these hidden passages are much more narrow, of course they get like ladders, or maybe even, no, I don't even put in spiral staircases. There's only one set of staircase that I did have to place in, and that's only the transition point from one of the hidden passages to the basement. And like directly to Bonehilda's room. And yes, in the next episode, you'll see me build out an entire room for Bonehilda, makeup station and all, because who knows, she probably wants to put on a red lip once in a while. But anyways, these sets of hidden passages is one of the coolest, absolute coolest features of the mansion here. And it's going to be a feature that will be unique for Goth Manor remaining throughout the entire series here. Like I'll never, as far as I can tell, like I totally anticipate never designing another set of hidden passages ever again. And let me tell you, hidden passages are very difficult in a way to design into a mansion build like this, because you have to take into consideration the space that you need. And with the hidden passages that I was designing here, I wanted to try and make them seem very narrow, but with some points where you need to have like two tiles wide for certain points here and there. Now, the thing with the hidden passages is that in order to keep them hidden and to keep them secret, so to speak, they can't be on the edges of the walls. And that's kind of what made them really difficult to work with, because if they're along the edges of the walls, or if they're against the back of the house, suddenly that takes away any opportunity to have windows along the back. And that was something that I absolutely wanted to have, especially when I was designing out both of the east and the west wing ballrooms. I really wanted those multi-story windows with a lot of light kind of shining in there, and the hidden passages made that look very difficult to achieve, just because they honestly take up a significant amount of space, and they can really break up your floor plan in a way that doesn't make sense. I felt that I was able to actually make it make sense in this case, and I'm very happy with the way that the hidden passages turned out. But yeah, they make your entire floor plan very complicated. And when I was designing out Goth Manor and the floor plan and all of that, the hidden passages was honestly what I designed the floor plan around, along with, of course, like main features like those multi-story windows for the east and west wing ballrooms. So yeah, they're very difficult. They made an already complicated build even more complicated. So that's why I really didn't want to I don't ever want to do them is for that reason. And secondly, I don't imagine that I'll be building many more older style-ish homes unless like the secret passage is like, you know, something very small. This one was very widespread and it extends to all 3 floors and a little bit including the basement if you really want to count that as the 4th floor there. Another challenge that I faced when building out Goth Manor was the shape of the roof. And a big reason for that is just because I mean, the roof tools are actually kind of difficult to really to use in The Sims 3. Like you have to be very intentional with what you are doing with them, just because they're just very limited. They're very hard to use. You pretty much click and drag and you have to drag it into the right shape and all that. Luckily, this is again where the massively massive mansion from Moonlight Falls really helped to guide me in terms of what I wanted that shape to be. With the massing of the massively massive mansion, all right, that was such a terrible sentence. With the shape and the form of the massively massive mansion from Moonlight Falls, it really helped to guide what the roof wanted to be, and it helped to like keep me on track as to how I wanted it to look. The roof of a home is very important to the actual look and feel of the home. And when I was doing my first attempt there, the roof was just looking ugly, and it was actually the roof in my first attempt that really convinced me that I needed to start over again and to start from a clean slate and to get new references. So yeah, that was a big deciding factor as to whether this build out was going to work or not, was whether or not the roof can be pulled off the way that it does. And luckily, you know, the roof really does come through in terms of adding the shape that I wanted it to convey, and also in terms of like conveying the fact that this is a massive mansion itself. And yeah, very happy with the way that the roof turned out. And as soon as I got the roof laying just right with Goth Manor, I knew that I was on the right track. I knew that I was on the right track before in my second attempt at making Goth Manor, but as soon as I got the roof in, it was, yeah, super convincing that I was gonna stick with this build out. Like I was really afraid of having to restart again because, you know, when I did the first attempt, like I cut out so much footage from that, obviously. Like I did a whole plan out with the floor tiles and whatnot, but yeah, when I did the first attempt, I had spent literally hours on it. Like if I wasn't taking a break at that time, I would have had to have delayed the episode for a while, at least an extra week. It would have forced me to take a break if I wasn't taking a break already. But yeah, the roof was super important here. Another thing that was super important, and you'll see me place the placeholder fireplaces in here. The fireplaces actually don't end up being placeholders. I just end up recoloring them, but the fireplaces and the chimneys were also very important to the look and feel of this home as well. I love the style that this home really took, and I feel like the massively massive mansion was also taking a lot of inspiration from a lot of other mansions that had a lot of symmetrical chimneys, and that was the thing as well, is that these chimneys and these fireplaces need to all be symmetrical, otherwise it was just like not going to work. There's only one tiny exception to this, and that would be in the kitchen. The kitchen fireplace, I believe, is the only one that is exceptional in terms of there being symmetrical fireplaces, but it's hidden in the back behind all the roofs, and I think it just kind of adds to a little more intrigue and to, you know, it helps to break up the symmetry of Goth Manor just a tiny bit here. And that's if I'm remembering it correctly. As I'm going through all the footage and all that, sometimes I don't remember things correctly, so hopefully I don't have to go back and edit myself and correct myself later on. But yeah, the roof is very important for the look and feel of this mansion and for any home in general. And the chimneys needed to be symmetrical here, and Okay, you guys will learn about this a little later on in the SimCity build series, and it's not even an episode that I have filmed yet, technically, but the symmetry of chimneys also is something that is important when we get to some of the uptown builds and all of that, and I'll share more on that vision a little later on. But yeah, I really wanted the chimneys to be symmetrical here. As a side note, and possibly as a reminder to myself, if I do decide to go back and edit Goth Manor, I could probably fit in some sort of an attic. I don't know what I would put in the attic, because at the end of the third episode here, it'll be like, what else can you furnish, really? So I might be putting in an attic sometime. I just have to figure out how to give access to that attic. Might be through the library, actually, but I'll have to figure out that if I do decide to give it an attic. But with the mansard roofs that you use and that you can build with in The Sims 3, if I remember correctly, again, this depends on me having a good memory, but if I remember correctly, if they're tall enough, you can actually put walls in them and build within those mansard roofs. And that might be something that I decide to do and go back and have done if I get any kind of like inspiration for doing an attic, and if there's a good place to actually access it. Might have to be another ladder from the hidden room, and that could make sense. That would make sense, actually. So yeah, that might be something that I do way far into the future. With the Pleasant View mansion builds, when we get to the actual Pleasant View neighborhood itself, some of the mansions will actually be built before. So it's not like we'll have to spend a lot of time in Pleasant View. It might just be a couple of episodes and then an editing episode, since I feel like these mansion builds are a great way to break up the pace of my SimCity build out series. Helps to get us like outside of the city, and that's kind of the purpose that I am going for here, unless of course like I'm changing architectural forms within some of those inner city neighborhoods. But yeah, I'll kind of but yeah, I'm using the Pleasant View mansion builds as that episode buffer to help just kind of give us something new to work with. And I don't know when the next time we'll do a mansion build after Goth Manor, just because I have a few ideas when building out Uptown and the Far East neighborhood on how I want to break up the pace a little bit with those two neighborhoods. And so yeah, I'll share more on that vision when we actually get there, though. We still have to get through Midtown, which is the next neighborhood build out that I have to do. And I felt that since we finished up the downtown and the central business district, that it would be a really nice way to just break up the pace by doing a mansion build before we do more denser urban building within SimCity. Now, I've mentioned it a couple of times already in terms of the layout, but I haven't really talked about it extensively yet. And yeah, so when I was designing Goth Manor here, I really wanted there to be a couple of ballrooms. One thing that I really didn't like about the massive mansion from Moonlight Falls was the way that they treated the multi-story windows that came with Supernatural. To me, like they put a bedroom on it, but to me those windows need to have like no floors on the second level there, and so that you let the light shine in. It feels like the window it feels like a floor in between the windows that do connect to each other, like the arched window and the other square paned one. It just kind of feels like when you put a floor in between them that you're really interrupting the light, and it's not actually functioning as it was designed to function. They are meant to be really large windows that reach multi-stories, and you know, I'm guilty of doing this myself in some of my builds. I think I've even done that once in one of my builds, but yeah, it always bothers me, even when I have done it, that if there's a floor in between those two windows, that you're kind of defeating the whole purpose of giving it that sense of grandeur and that sense of splendor. And yeah, that was something that influenced a big part of this build out here, was to incorporate those windows and to actually make sure that that enough light could pass through like all levels of the windows looking down, so that you would have super tall ceilings for both of the ballrooms and for the library that you'll eventually see me build within the next couple of episodes. So yeah, one thing that I did have to like compromise with though is when I was working on the hidden passages, that I had to have a hidden passage kind of pass in front of the back set of those multi-story windows, and so I just kind of had to compromise a little bit in terms of making sure that it had the space available to the space. I had to make sure that there wasn't any kind of floors on top of it, and I feel like I was able to achieve that, even though it sort of does interrupt the vibe just a little bit. But for the front facing, for the south multi-story windows, there's absolutely nothing in front of it, which is really the priority that I gave to it in this case. And yeah, it also kind of forced me to design the hidden passages so that you have like little exposed gaps between hidden passages. So you'll have a little hallway hidden passage lead to a certain point of a ballroom, and then you'd have one of those bookcase hidden doors between that and the next set of hidden passage hallways. And so that I felt was like a really subtle way so that you can have like Bonehilda like sneak from one to the other when the coast was clear. Because I imagine that like if the Goths were to invite any regular Sims over that were freaked out by Bonehilda, that, you know, they'd want her to be as discreet as possible. So yeah, that is kind of some of the psychology that went into designing the layout here, was really trying to balance those multi-story windows along with trying to figure out the hidden passages. And yeah, it really made for a unique layout in a lot of ways. But yeah, it was really the biggest focal point of this entire mansion build on the above ground segments. It's just really getting those super tall ceilings, these super grandeur ballrooms built in. And yeah, really happy with the way that they turned out. In fact, I'm over the moon with the way that they turned out, and the hallways that I placed kind of on top of them, just sort of planning out the different floors that I would use for hallway space on the second and third floors that cross the actual ballrooms. I feel adds a certain character to it as well. And yeah, again, I'm very happy with the way that the two ballrooms turned out, which I feel is, again, another unique feature of the home. I think that we all kind of get caught into these pigeonholes where we need to have like a living room and a dining room and a kitchen, and those are all in here. Except for maybe a living room technically, if we really wanted to get technical about it, but I threw one into the basement anyways for that. But yeah, having ballrooms in your mansion is actually quite a unique function to a room that you could say is just unique to Goth Manor. And yeah, the two ballrooms that I had designed here, one was more so for music, whereas the other one could be used as more of a cigar room or a drawing room that is closer to the kitchen because it's right adjacent to the dining room. And yeah, that was kind of the idea there, and that the more musical ballroom on the west wing, it's sitting right beside the 3-story library. And yes, I decided to add in a 3-story library to this build because, again, I really wanted to use the space as much as I could. I think it's easy to get sort of trapped into this mindset that you need to build a certain set of unique rooms on each floor, whereas you can just not have a floor and have really tall ceilings in The Sims 3. And so that's kind of where my head was at in terms of this. When when I do eventually get to building the bedrooms, you guys are going to see that the bedrooms that are on the second and third floor are kind of like sequestered into an actual sleeping quarters. And I think that it again reflects a realistic, okay, I think it reflects the needs that this mansion had to place on me when I was doing these multi-leveled ballrooms and libraries. So yeah, it kind of put me in a unique situation where I really had to think about creating a true sleeping quarters for the Goth family that would reside in this home. And yeah, the kitchen, when we do get to the kitchen, is very large, and I designed the kitchen in a way so that there was no eating spots there. When I was doing the Crumple Bottom Chateau, there was a huge island, and it did have it was pretty much a breakfast nook there where you could just kind of eat, and it also connected to the true dining room as well. And Sims do like eat both in the kitchen and in the dining room. I've done some testing with the Crumple Bottom Chateau, but when I actually did get to doing the kitchen here, that was something that I absolutely did not want to have. I wanted to have everybody eating in the dining room, and I'll explain more on that vision in the next episode when we actually do get to design out the kitchen and I do get to decorate it, because the kitchen turned out really fantastic and I used some really great inspiration for that. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. For me, the windows kind of came very naturally in terms of which windows I wanted to place. I know that when I was building out the Crumple Bottom Chateau mansion build way back when, that I really struggled on finding the exact right windows or right set of windows that I wanted to use. Here, obviously in the Goth Manor, those multi-story windows were clearly a staple in terms of giving the mansion the look that it needed to, but the ancillary windows that I used were actually decisions that I made that I felt came quite quickly to me. And when you're designing a home of any kind, like your windows, your roof, and the massing in of itself makes a huge difference to the look and feel of it and the general vibe that it's going for. Obviously, when I went to choose the ancillary windows and some of the additional windows and all that, I really wanted those stone windows on there just to kind of give it that older style feel and to not detract away from the multi-story French style windows that I had placed in the mansion. And I also love the fact that you can pretty much look through the ballrooms from one end to the other. So yeah, the windows really came quite easily to me, and same with the columns. The columns actually added in quite a bit of character to this mansion, and that was something that I was absolutely in love with. And this mansion build of mine, I'll probably mention this several times throughout part 2 and part 3, but this mansion build actually ended up being 1.1 million simoleons after it's furnished and all that. So it's a super expensive mansion and a great challenge for players that are looking to do like rags to riches and want to purchase this as their big finale. The Crumple Bottom Chateau, if I remember correctly, was only like 700, maybe 600, much less than this. And a big reason for that is because the Crumple Bottom Chateau build, I really wanted to use a lot of open space for that, whereas here there's very much a designation and an intention with every single room of the Goth Manor. I mean, each ballroom has a bunch of furniture, whereas in the Crumple Bottom Chateau there's a lot more open space to it. Another thing that you'll see on screen here, and something that is also unique to this build, but something that might reappear in other mansion builds, is the building out of a solarium. Towards the back of the house, I really, I knew that I wanted to build a solarium, I just didn't know what form it would take. And so when I was kind of playing around with it, especially in the first attempt at building out this mansion, it turned out that the solarium that I ended up building was going to take on more of a hexagonal shape, and I really like how it ended up turning out. But because this mansion is built on a foundation, it does make placing stairs kind of difficult. And you'll see that when we do build out the garages, either in this episode or in the next episode. But to have a foundation, like a floor on a foundation interact with a floor that's on direct ground level, it's very hard to do that in The Sims 3, especially when trying to get the walls to look like they are meshing into each other. Again, you'll see that as I build the garages, especially for the exteriors, that the exterior wallpaper kind of looks a little warped around the garage doors, and that was just an imperfection I was going to have to accept here. Maybe I can hide it with a with a column. Who knows? Maybe I'll hide it with vines or something. But that's a note for me to do in the editing at a much later time. But yeah, the solarium was something that kind of surprised me in terms of how nicely it meshed with the rest of the home. It helps to bring a focal point to the house, like especially when viewing it from Blue Water Village or from the downtown area. If you look up and see the Goth Manor, you'll actually see parts of the solarium roof at the very least. And the windows and the roof decorations that I used for the solarium is all from a Sims 3 store pack. I believe it's the greenhouse one, and that greenhouse pack is certainly something that I continue to frequently use. I used it in the Old Town Station restaurant build. That I used the walls for that, and yeah, and I also what really pairs well with the greenhouse roofs is the actual glass floor carpets from Into the Future. So if you're ever struggling with a certain space or something, you can just use those as well, and it can help to make it make sense, essentially. But yeah, the solarium was certainly something that kind of took me by surprise as to how well it would fit. I thought I was going to have to hide it a little more, or it was just going to have to be another place of imperfection that I would have to tolerate. But it really makes for a nice transition from the foundational floors into the actual ground level floors. So yeah, very happy with how the solarium turned out as well. Now that I think about it, I think that what helps to make this mansion so expensive is the amount of columns that I'm using, because columns they add significantly to the price of a home. And yeah, when I actually had to, when I was trying to make sure that there wasn't any kind of floors or ceilings in between the multi-story French style windows there, I decided that one of the best and most graceful ways to try to build some sort of a hallway on the second floor was to just have it supported by columns. I really like how it turned out in terms of style and in terms of decor. It adds an extra detail into the ballroom that I think was actually very necessary, because otherwise it's just a bunch of blank space to just kind of hang out in. But with those bridges that just kind of sit on top of it, which serve as truly hallways for the second and third floors, it again adds another point of visual intrigue that also doesn't block any of the light coming from the second and third windows there. It isn't just a floor on top of it where the lights stop. It's where it's actually an open hallway where the light can actually pour through and land in the ballroom from the north side of the house. So yeah, that was an ingenious idea that I was able to implement, if I dare say so myself. Not going to be humble on that one there, but yeah, I think that a big reason as to why the house ended up being so expensive for Sims 3 standards is just because of the amount of columns that I was using, as well as the general massing of it as well. and it's a lot more decorated, like I mentioned earlier before. For the rest of the episode, all you guys are really going to be seeing me do is plot out and plan the floor plans of the next couple of floors that just kind of sit on top of the first one. So for the second and the third floor. On the second floor, because I have a multi-story library, a library that reaches up to 3 floors there, I decided to completely, dedicate the west wing of the mansion to that third and second floor of library space there. So I'll talk a little more on that a little later on. But on the second floor, I also want to have like an extensive master suite bedroom. So there's a bit of plotting and planning that goes along with it. And of course, because I want all of those hidden passageways to reach the second and third floors, I also have to plan surrounding that as well. Now, my idea with that is just that with the first floor set of hidden passageways being so extensive that reach from the west side to the east wings of the house, that I didn't need to do so many I didn't need to build so many hidden passages. I just needed to give access from the first floor upwards. So that's why I decided to keep like the hallways very narrow, just using ladders here and there where it makes sense within the first floors of hidden passageways. And yeah, that was really the logic behind that, and that if Bonehilda needed to access like the east wing of the house and she's on the second floor of the west wing, well, unfortunately she'll have to climb down a ladder and then make her way to the other side before climbing up another ladder to reach the second and third floors on the other side there. But yeah, there was really no way for me to rebuild what I had done on the first floor for those hidden passageways. It just wouldn't have made sense, and it would have completely interrupted and distracted from the grandeur and the large open spaces of the ballrooms. And I really didn't want to do that. I wanted to minimize the impact on those ballroom spaces as I could, while also still achieving the idea of putting in hidden passageways for Bonehilda or for whatever sim that wants to use the hidden passageways. And again, like I've done playtesting and all the sims want to use the hidden passageways whenever possible, but I'm kind of getting a little distracted there. The hidden passageways on the second and third floors was mostly just to give like access there. So, you know, theoretically you could have Bonehilda like deliver a meal up to the second and third floors and she'll have direct access to the kitchen from there. Or if she needed to, you know, do some cleaning on the other side, like for the library, she would have to make her way across and you know, climb up a couple of sets of ladders before she could clean the libraries. I just really like the idea of hidden passageways and kind of giving it this fun little lore spin that maybe Bonehilda uses them is something that I feel is is kind of funny. It's kind of fun, and it does help to explain a little bit of a reason behind why they might exist. Of course, like in the real world, hidden passages like this could exist for you know, security purposes. And you know, now that I'm saying that out loud, I never ended up building like a, a safe room or a treasury or anything, which would be a good idea. But yeah, these kind of hidden rooms could be that, or they could lead to a panic room of some sort, or a series of panic rooms. But I never actually ended up doing it. I could have them lead up to an attic if that is something that I so desperately want to have. Maybe the attic could be a panic room of some sort. There's lots of ideas here, ideas that I'll have to get to in the far future because I don't have time to like go back and edit them at this time. I don't have any plans to do that. I plan to do like a big Pleasant View editing episode when I'm actually working in the neighborhood there. But yeah, the hidden passageways were certainly designed throughout this first episode here, and we're really only going to see the layout for the first floor, second floor, and third floor. And I end off with just doing a little bit of decorating for the front entrance and the atrium there. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on, and this mansion, although it is complicated, it all came together very quickly. As soon as I found that massive mansion from Moonlight Falls, it all just really came together very quickly, and that included the interior decorating as well. It was just something that was very tedious for me to actually do, and it just took a long time, and I feel that the journey that I had to take with building out Goth Manor is certainly something worth sharing with you guys, in case you do get an inspiration, or if you do have ideas on what you want to do with your own Sims 3 builds as well. So yeah, very happy with this mansion. I honestly think that it is a masterpiece. so yeah, it's easily hands down the best thing I've ever built in The Sims 3. I had mentioned this before, but it does bear repeating because we are about to lay out the basement. And when building in The Sims 3, basements within a foundation, within a building that's sitting on top of a foundation, don't exactly mix well together. And what's really unfortunate about that is that I feel that buildings that are on foundations are pretty standard, and this was something that you would have seen me struggle with in one of my older episodes where I was building out a single family home in the Bridgeview neighborhood, and that was an urban home that was much longer than it was wide, but it was still a home built on a foundation that had a basement to it. And that's kind of a construction standard that I want to apply to my SimCity builds, especially when it comes to single family homes. Like there might be an exception with townhouses, but that is something that we'll have to cross that bridge when we get there. Because I have a few ideas on how those are going to turn out. But anyways, the important thing when building basements for homes that sit on top of foundations is that you kind of have to do it all far in advance. And that's something that you would have seen towards the beginning of this episode. You would have seen me place the stairs where I needed them to be placed, because this game, for some reason, likes to make it difficult after you place a basement. After you place a basement within a foundation, like it just won't add stairs from the basement to the ground level, where then you can add in stairs from a foundation to the ground level and then kind of cover it all up. This game doesn't really play nice when it comes to that. So you really have to place the stairs kind of knowing where you want the rest of your layout to be. And that's why I spent so much time within this episode mapping out the layout that I wanted with just floor tiles, is because as soon as you place a foundation on top of a basement with walls surrounding it, like claiming that it's indoors, the game likes to be very difficult about where you place stairs from there on going forward, and it can really screw up your layout. So that's why I decided to place the stairs in advance where I knew that they would be. It's something that I did with a crumple bottom chateau as well, so I do apologize if I'm just repeating myself from an older episode, but it is something that is that's very vital going forward, because if you screw up your staircases, I mean, that's a very important part of the home. And I know I'm going to have to face this issue again when I do more single family homes, either in Bridgeview or in the Blue Water Village suburb neighborhood that I've got sitting just at the foot of the hills here that I'm sure you guys are seeing. That's where we built the school and all that, if you remember. But yeah, the placing foundations on top of basements is super difficult. Better to just kind of get the basement built first, it's better to build where you know you want your basement stairs to go, and then you can kind of expand it out from there. So that's exactly what happened here. Is in the beginning, you would have seen me place a little bit of a basement and a set of stairs as well. And you also have to be careful with how you place the stairs too, because because if you just build the basement walls, if you just build the basement so that it's the exact size that you need the stairs to be, well, your stairs are not going to have any descending walls on either side of them, which is, you know, another problem with this game is that it doesn't really do stairs that well in terms of adding in the walls underneath the stairs if you're placing them outside. Like, it has an issue like recognizing what's outside and what's inside. And I've done some townhouse builds at the time of recording this video, and I can tell you firsthand that if you're missing that wall underneath those stairs, it's hard to place in, so you have to fake it by putting walls around it. Anyways, my suggestion here is if you are going to have a basement under a structure with a foundation, build out the basement area that you need with the stairs, but make sure that you're building out that basement area so that it's large enough for the stairs to be built with walls, like descending walls underneath. I hope that's making sense, and I hope that on screen, like, it would have shown that kind of a building process there, because it is a little tedious to do, and it's also good advice that I would have loved to have had years back when I was building when I was first playing The Sims 3 and all that. Now that I'm back in the game, I'm actually a little wiser and I kind of have an idea of what I'm doing. In fact, it was for that reason that I had to restart completely with the Bridgeview suburban house build that I had done way back when on this channel. So yeah, watch out for those basements and having a basement under a structure with a foundation. And yeah, same thing kind of goes for garages in a way, because the way that I do garages is that I build them on ground floor and then I have them connect to, you know, to the rest of the structure with a foundation. And Goth Manor is no exception here. And so, although it wasn't like an issue for that per se, it's tedious, and it's something that the Sims 3 really doesn't do well, is recognizing ground level to foundation level for indoor structures or indoor rooms and all that. And it's another big reason why split levels aren't really a thing in The Sims 3, or at least they're very difficult and tedious to actually do. But yeah, I have a build coming up far into the future. I keep saying that, but it's far into the future where, you know, maybe split levels might be a thing. So yeah, there is certainly that. When it comes to, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, when it comes to the basement, I really wanted the basement to also have some secret parts to it, like parts that's not accessible from the public. And you'll see that in the room layout as well, that I just kind of design it with a few things in mind here and there. I think I might have even dropped in some objects here and there. And the objects that I would drop in, if I'm not doing it on screen, I will be doing in the next episode anyways, is just that I end up placing some of those vampire, they're not technically coffins, that's The Sims 2, but they're the vampire beds that they kind of sleep and float on. So that's going to be going into the basement, where there's more like supernatural elements here, whereas the rest of the mansion is more like an ode to those supernatural elements. Yeah, so there's a lot to come with this episode, and yeah, I know that the Goths aren't vampires per se, but the theme of the Goths lend themselves so well that I figured that even though this is called Goth Manor and it's meant to be a place where the founding family, the Goths, actually live, that, you know, if players wanted to find like some sort of a place to make their vampires live, if they enjoy playing with vampires, then this mansion might actually be something that is actually suitable to their needs. And that's something as well that I'm trying to design SimCity with, is that there might be certain nods to certain supernatural elements here and there. And I definitely go into that deeper with Old Town and in the future with Magic Town builds as well. I never intended for Goth Manor to be a 3-part episode situation. So the breaks between like part 1 and part 2 of the episode are just like, I'm just gonna have to stop them where I stop them as we come up on the hour here. So because I never intended on this actually being a 3-part episode or a 3-part speed build, I am going to end off this episode with just doing some some interior decorating for the entrance or to the atrium here. And yeah, the decor that I am going with is of course inspired by the Goth namesake itself. So I am looking for more Gothic interior decorating. The mansion itself could, you could make the case that it is inspired by Gothic architecture. I wouldn't go as far to say that, but you could make the case. And yeah, the interior is definitely going to lean more into those Goth elements. I think it also takes a little bit of inspiration from, Beetlejuice as well. Speaking of which, the new Beetlejuice movie is like coming out. I saw a trailer for that somewhere. Either that or it was a really well-made fake trailer where Winona Ryder is coming back. That's pretty awesome of her. But yeah, I'm getting distracted here. So yeah, the entrance is really going to be the only thing that you guys really see in terms of the interior decorating here. For the rest of the series, like in the next episode, we are going to be decorating the first floor, which I am very excited to show you guys. You'll see how everything kind of coincides and how it's all cohesive with each other. And then we also do the backyard as well, if I remember correctly, and then the basement. Because the basement is certainly like a level of the house that I like to get done before I finish off with the second and third floors. And I think that a whole reason that I do that is just for the lighting of like the upper floors. It's just like an order that I do in. And when I end off a build, I like to end it off like in the daylight and everything is nice, bright and cheery. Whereas I find that I can get a little, I don't want to say anxious, but I can get a little lazy when it comes to decorating the basement last because, there's nothing really to see in terms of like there being like any natural lights and all that. It's just a personal thing. I just don't like doing the basements last because I find that I don't do as good of a job on the basements as I would have if I had done it earlier. Like I don't give it enough personality per se. And that's something I'm going to continue doing going forward, with the exception of bungalow homes with basements in them. But anyways, this mansion is just, it just knocks my socks off every time I load up the game. And the Crumple Bottom Chateau is also another lot build that I did that I'm really in love with. But this one is just, like, I know I'm better at it, and I'll talk a little more about the interior decor, but I should talk a little bit more about the entrance here. So the entrance, I wanted to make it something a little more original. The interior design is again Gothic, and it's something that has a little more creepier vibes to it, and I really wanted to convey that in the entrance here, just because the Goths are pretty much like the Addams Family of the Sims world. They are a little out there, they've got their own sense of style, they love their Gothic stuff, and I really wanted to emphasize that within the interior decorating, and the entrance specifically really hits upon those themes as well. There are some great candle objects that I placed on the ground, and I decided to change a lot of those colors to like a bright red, just to kind of give it that ominous feeling there. And the arch that's in the middle there is actually it's either from the greenhouse set, or it's from another set that does a lot of gardening. I completely forget what it's called, but the arch is from that set, and it's actually a wedding arch. So you could theoretically have your Sims married in the atrium, which I think is quite unique. And it also helps to create like a nice centerpiece to it as well. I've done testing with this house, and a significant amount of testing, and the pathways are all there, and Sims can like get through them and everything. Because one thing that really bothers me specifically about The Sims 4 is that everything feels very claustrophobic, and even though this atrium kind of feels a little claustrophobic to me, Sims can still like move about and everything. I don't know if they can actually get married in the actual arch itself, but even if they can't, it's still a nice centerpiece to have. That's gonna about do it for today's episode. If the tours aren't already playing, they will in just a moment. Now, when it comes to the tours, you'll see that the backyard is actually fully decorated. And again, I never planned on making this a 3-episode situation, so I just kind of had to use the screenshots that I used at the time. And when I shot the screenshots, they were all of the house when it was completed. So you guys get kind of a sneak preview of what's to come there. And yeah, if you've enjoyed this episode, if you've enjoyed this series and this speed build, then feel free to like this video and consider subscribing if you haven't already. I just want to take another moment here to say thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have yourself a wonderful day.